Today we seek to find the answer to one important question. Join us on our adventure to discover how U.S. involvement affected the outcome of the Second Great War.
To understand World War II, we need to go to the era right before it. World War I had shattered most of Europe and left it to pick up the pieces. In the years following the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, dramatic political change swept across Europe. After the failure of democracy in Europe, countries like Germany and Italy developed a new type of government, totalitarianism. Countries under this system controlled every aspect of their people's lives under the rule of a dictator. These totalitarian states quickly strengthened their economies and militaries. Their actions were the first steps towards the next World War.
Adolf Hitler, Germany's dictator and leader of the Nazi Party, violated the terms of the Versailles Treaty by rebuilding Germany's army to be the strongest in the world, and in March of 1936, using said army to remilitarize the buffer between France and Germany known as Rhineland. Hitler's invasion of Europe had begun. He also wanted Austria and Czechoslovakia, so in March of 1938, Hitler moved his troops into Austria and annexed the country without opposition. And 2 days later, Hitler declared his intentions to take over a region of Czechoslovakia known as Sudetenland. This almost pushed Europe into war. Worried by the dictator's actions, various European leaders set up a conference with Hitler and met in Mulmich, Germany, in September of 1938. The conference ended in the appeasement of Hitler's demands and was given Sudetenland. Europe believed the war was prevented, but less than a year later, Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia and had his hungry eyes set on Poland. So on September 1st, 1939, Hitler led the Nazi invasion of Poland, marking the beginning of World War II. 2 days after Hitler invaded Poland, France and Great Britain came to Poland's aid and declared war on Germany. After their declaration of war, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt declared the United States neutral. However, he wanted to help the two nations. Upon FDR's request, Congress changed the Neutrality Acts to allow the sale of American arms to warring countries, as long as they continued with the cash-and-carry policy of a country paying cash for weapons and transporting the goods themselves. To further show his support to the Allied forces, Roosevelt agreed to sell Great Britain old American destroyers in exchange for the right to build American bases in British-controlled areas of the world. This pattern of Ally-leaning neutrality continued over the next couple of years, through arrangements like the Lend-Lease Act and the Atlantic Charter.
In the late 1930s, tensions between Japan and the U.S. formed. The Japanese military had complete control over the country and intended to expand its sphere of influence. The Japanese decided to push towards China, an ally of America, and the East Indies, which were rich in oil reserves. These aggressions made the U.S. wary of Japan, and when the war started, Japan quickly made an alliance with Germany and Italy, creating the Axis powers. By 1940, Japan moved to establish the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. The concept was created as an appeal to all Asians to rid themselves of European rule and to become part of an Asian empire. Much of southern Asia, also known as Indochina, was under the control of France, which Asians despised. Once Germany conquered France, Japan moved in to take control of Indochina, looking to benefit from its abundance of natural resources. Once Japan took control of Indochina, FDR demanded Japan withdraw not only from Indochina but also from China. When Japan did not, the U.S. placed an oil embargo on Japan and froze all its American assets. This crippled the Japanese military, and they felt as though they had no other choice but to go to war with America.
Japan knew that they were no match for the United States. They believed that their only chance was to knock out the American fleet stationed at Pearl Harbor in the Hawaiian Islands with a surprise attack. This attack came on the morning of December 7, 1941. The Japanese sank or damaged 21 ships, including sinking 5 important U.S. battleships, destroyed 188 airplanes, and killed over 2,400 people. Fortunately for the United States, its aircraft carriers were out to sea and none were lost. The next day, U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt would ask Congress to declare war.
Germany's invasion started strong, conquering France within weeks of the war. But the dictator's ambition would ultimately be his downfall. The only thing that stood between Hitler and the domination of Western Europe was Great Britain. So immediately after the fall of France, Hitler began plans to invade Great Britain. The Nazis led an air-based assault which would be known as the Battle of Britain, from late 1940 to early 1941. Despite his best efforts, he eventually gave up. After failing in his attempts to conquer Great Britain, Adolf Hitler decided to break off his attack and turn to the east and invade Russia. Joseph Stalin, Russia's communist dictator, had signed a non-aggression pact with Hitler during Germany's invasion of Poland. But Hitler broke his word, and in June of 1941, Hitler launched an invasion of the Soviet Union. Germany caught the Russians totally by surprise, and within 5 months, German troops were within miles of the Russian capital of Moscow. But when the harsh Russian winter hit, the German advance was stopped. By the fall of 1942, Germany was not only just outside Moscow, but they were also just outside the key city of Stalingrad. The Battle of Stalingrad was a turning point of World War II. It was during this battle that the Russians held off the German advance. Following this battle, the Germans went on the defensive and retreated.
The Battle of Stalingrad showed that the Allies were ready to start taking back territory. To do this, though, meant a large-scale invasion, a very difficult task, and there would be thousands of lives lost. But if the Allies were to win the war, it had to be done. The first large Allied invasion took place in North Africa in November of 1942. This showed that the Allies could mount a large-scale invasion from the sea. The next step was a full-scale invasion of Europe. The starting of this invasion took place in July of 1943 in Sicily, Italy. After about 5 months, the Allies were finally able to break into the Italian mainland and take control. The next target was France. On June 6, 1944, thousands of Allied troops stormed the region of France known as Normandy, a monumental point of the war now known as D-Day. Because of the sheer size of the invasion, Germany had no choice but to fall back. Germany was now forced to fight a two-front war, with Allied forces on the western border and the Russians on the east.
Over the next 3 months following D-Day, German forces fell into a massive retreat on both fronts. Hitler launched his strongest forces to push back Allied lines. This battle, known as the Battle of the Bulge, was won by the Allies and was the last battle of the war. During this battle, the Russians made their way for Berlin, and in April 1945, Adolf Hitler and his top commanders committed suicide. On May 7, 1945, the Germans surrendered. This day was known as VE Day, for Victory in Europe. The fighting in Europe was finally over. All that was left was for the Allies to defeat Japan in what was known as the Pacific Theater.
When Japan joined the war, there was a constant power struggle over the Pacific with the United States. Japan was capturing islands throughout the Pacific, clearing a way for a Japanese invasion of America. It wasn't until the Battle of Midway, where an American fleet stopped the approaching Japanese sent to capture the small island atoll of Midway, that the Americans were able to force Japan to go on the defensive. From that point on, America started systematically taking back islands from Japan. Unfortunately, every island that was taken back was paid for in the blood of thousands of American troops, especially the islands of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. These battles paved the way for a potential invasion of Japan, but leaders of the U.S. knew that to invade Japan would mean the loss of thousands of more American lives. So, in July 1945, new U.S. President Harry S. Truman decided to use a secret weapon, the atomic bomb. On August 6, 1945, the world's first atomic bomb was dropped on the Japanese city of Hiroshima, killing 140,000 people. 2 days later, a second atomic bomb was dropped on the city of Nagasaki. On September 15, 1939, Japan's leaders finally realized that they were defeated and surrendered. And on September 2, 1945, Japan gave its unconditional surrender. World War II was officially over.
Despite its claimed neutrality early into the war, the United States played a vital role in World War II even before Pearl Harbor. Without Roosevelt and America's early supply of goods and weaponry, the Allied forces would have had trouble fending off the Nazi invasion. And once the U.S. entered the war, they provided troops and even more supplies needed to win the war.